I I found myself, first of all, after a lesson, it's like it completely changed my whole day for the better, and it lingered with me for a couple days. I felt a softness, a quietness, an absence of some of the confusion that I'd had rattling around my mind. I felt more connected to my children, to my wife, and to the people who I was interfacing with through the rest of the day. And so those were certainly positive attributes that I then wanted to say, and this is like always my mistake. How do I get back to that thing?
Okay, so I think that's a good way to start. I think it's a good
Yeah.
question. And the idea of navigating back home is central to the way I understand the technique. And the navigating back home, or you could call it self-regulation, is something that keeps on developing as an evolution rather than a hack.
Mhm.
In other words, your capacity for your organism to recover the place and space that you're talking about is not a conscious decision. Oh, I think I'll just move into the zone. I wish it was that easy.
Right.
Otherwise, I'd tell everybody on the phone, here's the way to do it, and that's the end of the story. So at the moment, you and I are working together to reorganize and influence the nervous system, your nervous system, through my nervous system at the moment. We're working together.
Right.
And the outcome of this working together, this meeting, is that there's a certain quality of refinement or shift or softening of the overactive buzz, the habitual distortions of the mind body that we carry around. And some of that, as you quite rightly say, softens as a result of the work. And that develops as a capacity that you have this internal, you could call it an internal Alexander teacher, or the internal self-regulation that allows you to recover and move back towards this state when you lose it, or more quickly after you've lost it. But if you say, how do I keep it? No idea. I think what you also develop is the ability not to lose it through reactivity of the nervous system, through the overly quick reactions to stimuli, which most of us are plagued with.
Yes.
I wish I had a sort of a quick hack and a magic wand, and I would say to you, well, just take this magic pill, or think about this mantra, or imagine yourself on a desert island lying on the sand, and then you've just transported yourself back into the zone. I wish it was that easy. And for me, it's an ongoing evolution. I haven't reached a state of staying anywhere. Myself, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And then the attempt to try to recover it certainly seems to push it farther and farther away.
I think that's
So
exactly, I think it's a lovely way of putting it. I think the attempt to try to recover it, and the word trying is the actual word that is the problem.
right.
It pushes away the self-regulation further and further. Yeah.
So
So really what you're training yourself to do is, when you know you're out of the zone, the truth is when you're out of the zone, you're probably on the way back because you've registered something. And your capacity for recovering is probably quicker than you realize. I think the problem is when you don't know you're out of the zone and just going through habitual mindless rubbish. And then you don't even know, in the zone, out the zone, your mind is just not present. You're not alive. You're not really mindful.
right.
I think the second you realize, blimey, I've been out of this zone, I've been in a bit of a pickle, that tells me that you're not in a pickle when you have that realization.
Yes.
So in other words, there's nothing to try at that moment. Oh, I'm out of the zone. How do I get back? Turn the question on its head and say, I'm already on the way back.
Mm.
And so that's what we can do in the sessions, these formal sessions of Alexander work. What we're doing is refining that ability of returning, of coming back home.
Okay, so then may I ask a follow-up to that? So then what it seems like is, I guess I'm noticing more and more of the places where I get thrown out of that zone. And it seems like, as we discussed last time, it's not just a stimulus that I'm observing outside, say in the teaching room when I have a group full of 15 students. It's not as much that as the way I'm reacting to what I'm seeing there. And that reaction seems to be coming from this little schism I have. And I think we've touched on this in every lesson we've done, where it's that whole cart before the horse thing. I'm teaching someone about a form, a sort of favorable set of relationships in the body, call it alignment or whatever.
Yeah.
Leading toward this sacred geometry or whatever, something that's been helping me.
Yes.
So it feels like implicitly I'm telling them before I even said anything that they're wrong, that they don't have it. And no matter how much I try to say, like, we're coming back to it, it's inherent in you, you can follow, you can find it.
Yes, I get that. You're setting up a paradox where you're saying, yes, it's all right, and you don't have to effort it because it's already there. But implicitly, you are saying, you haven't got it now, you're not okay now, so some form of effort may be required to get it back again. Yeah.
Right.
So in a way, what you want to do is, again, reverse that, turn it on its head, and through your own being okay with where they are, not even request that they need to be in a different place, but almost acknowledge and affirm where they are. It's okay just the way you are. Paradoxically, that allows a different quality from you, because you've got no ambition to change that. So yes, but you're right. If you say, look, you haven't got it right now, I really want you to get this stuff. I really want you to sort of get back to the good place. It's not that you're wrong, but you are wrong because you haven't got it. It does set up a sense of split, as you say, a schism. I'm not okay the way I am. I've got to get somewhere where I'm not, and that creates a conflict. And what you want to do in your teaching methodology, in my understanding, is not create a conflict.
Right.
So, like if I was working with you right now, let's take it as an example. Right now, there's nothing to change, and there's nothing to achieve. Right now, there's nowhere to get to, and wherever you are is okay, and there's nowhere to strive for. So that's our beginning. And right now, I want you to just rotate your hands, not because it's better or worse. And whatever you're doing right now is okay. You can't do any wrong. And then you rotate your hands again. And lift your hands halfway. And rotate them. Yeah. And rotate them again. Fine. And then stop and place them back on your thighs. And there's nothing to do in your shoulders or your neck. There's no sacred relationship to achieve. Something may evolve itself when it wants to, but not from your ambition, but from another place. As you say, inherently, something may happen all the way through. Something may refine, something may shed, something may soften, something may tone. You and I don't know that. And it's not for us to work it out. And it starts off by saying, here is where we are. And we can refine that right now. Allow your thumbs, move your thumbs in towards each other so they can, right. So what did that do just then, that little tweak?
Yeah, that was from last lesson. That little softening tends to help widen my back and soften my breastbone.
Yeah. So it's like you're just coming off a certain form of this is how I have my hands. And it's like, you've gone from a little bit of this to a certain, almost like accepting the way you are without you being ambitious with how you're sitting in a nice cross-legged condition. That even in that condition, there's nothing you have to achieve within yourself.
Right.
Now, from this condition, if you talk to me and say, Anthony, I want you to play around with a certain form, maybe sacred geometric forms, let's play. But the way that you demonstrate or talk to me would be from this condition and not from this condition. So I'd already pick up on you. I'd resonate with you just being okay with you as you're being okay with me. And we work with, and that's what you're returning to right now, that you're starting off with, I'm not even going to ambition myself, never mind you. And so in a way, whatever words you now come up with, they are bathed in your non-ambition.
Mm. And the rub is then, I'm thinking of it like this, where the part of me that feels like he needs to hold the room or needs to help someone or needs to perform, I feel like that's the stimulus that gets me totally derailed. And I find myself going more into that outward thing, right?
Yeah. So I think the outward thing is fine as a structure, but you're going to be filling the structure with content. And the content or the vitality within the structure animates the structure, but the structure by itself is lifeless. It's a skeleton. And so the structure, devoid of the animation that you're now showing me, doesn't have very much value. But the structure that you now animate to me, your whole body language, your emanations, are really valuable. So in this condition, you can talk about structure or even demonstrate structure, but it's coming from an inner manifestation of something else. And I think that's what pulls people in and invites them into a new condition.
And that's when I find that feel like my work is at its best, is when it is actually inviting people in. We're both softening. I feel like that's when this self-righting mechanism you talk about, or self-regulation, just seems to do itself. So then I still just have a few red flag inconsistencies with it. So when Alexander said, if only we stop doing the wrong thing, the right thing does itself, is that he's still using language of right and wrong. And is that just Victorian language, or is you're saying you're wrong?
I would certainly say that language is not language I would use today, but the meaning behind it I would still affirm. So the meaning behind it is, if I'm in a state of reactivity or trying and ambition and effort, it's not wrong. It's just human nature. And as I allow my ambitious trying self to soften and melt, the organismic natural condition is liberated. It's given more space.
Right.
Not right and wrong. It's different ways of being human, isn't it? It's the human condition. If I'm in a freak out, overwhelmed, I'm not at my best level of functioning. It's not wrong. It's just a fact. It's just that my brain is frazzled. And when that quietens down, I regulate back again. So when a child has a temper tantrum, you would say that's not great if they stay stuck in tantrums, but they don't stay stuck. They regulate. You give them the lollipop back or the dummy and they regulate again. Right. So I think right and wrong set up a bit of an educational problem. But the meaning behind them is that nervous system shock, nervous system reactivity isn't a place to stay, is correct. It's a place to be for all sorts of emergencies and totally appropriate, but you want to recover as quickly as possible. I think most of us have a problem of not knowing how to recover. So we stay in places of hypervigilance, headless chicken behavior, or compression depression, and we don't actually regulate back. That's the point. It's not that those other places are wrong or not part of the human condition. Of course they are. It's whether we can navigate back again, navigate back home, and leave home and navigate back again, like the tides of coming in and out.
Yeah.
So I think the category of wrong isn't appropriate for the organism that goes through all sorts of biochemical and neurological realities.
Mm-hmm.
Excitement, anxiety, shock when you hear a loud noise is quite a legitimate part of our system, readying our systems for flight or fight, sometimes freeze. Totally normal and appropriate. These aren't the problems. The problems is when these conditions are sort of almost on the cusp of happening every few milliseconds, that we're primed for overreaction, not that they happen appropriately. And so we never get back to a deep baseline, a home state of being okay. And I think that's what we offer in the Alexander technique, a roadmap back home.
Right. Okay. And so then that roadmap, it's got some clues, some physical clues, like you say, the softening of that thumb, or the softening of the sternum, or the softening of my jaw. It seems like those are indicators of that return back to baseline, right?
Yeah. They could, they take you off a little bit of the staying stuck somewhere in trying mode. Yeah.
So then, is it okay? I rewatched one of those John Doe Masuero exercise videos. I just find it fascinating that he's so on the other end of the Alexander spectrum of you in some ways. And I hear him talk about in very harsh terms about how someone's going wrong and what they're doing that's misusing themselves, and how it's just absolutely terrible the way they're unduly lifting their chests or whatever. And then I'm like, okay, well, even with, if you can just drop some of the language, the thing that he is guiding you to, it's almost the same thing you were saying to me, but just in a totally different way.
Yes. So I'm not. Yes, I think you've made a very good point. So we may both see the manifestations of good use of self in a similar way. The question is, what's the roadmap? And the way I understand it is, if you shame and blame and push and pull and effort and ambition people, you may want that goal of the beautiful sacred geometry, but it ain't gonna happen, because you're creating a reaction inside of trying and shaming and blaming, of sense of failure, that then evokes more reactions and more reactions. And so I think the goal is, we can share the goal. My passion is, what is the best route to achieve the goal? And my understanding is that trying very hard to achieve a goal sabotages the achievement of the goal. And what I've found from experience is that when you allow people to be who they are, their reactions, which Alexander said are the things that go wrong, the reactive self, is diminished. And that reveals what Alexander called the right, the organic, the inner essence of the sacred geometry, the inner flow, the vital force. And I don't believe the vital force comes through by trying to drag it upwards and pushing outwards and structuring on the outside. I don't believe it ever happens like that. I've tried it a few times. It doesn't seem to work. What I do think seems to work is an invitation, and not a not a threat.
Yeah.
I think under
Agree.
threat, we reinforce the habits of reaction to danger.
Yeah.
Under being told you're wrong, it activates a sense of failure and inferiority. So you're basically creating more buttons of reaction when you tell people off for not achieving the right thing. Then you're either forced to try to please your teacher or feel so bloody awful that you end up in a pulled down depression because you feel a failure. I don't think that's the royal road to achieving the right thing doing itself. I just don't buy it.
So then that begs the question, what is the royal road? Is it this kindness, acceptance of what is, or kindness toward oneself? Is that the primary?
I think you could, there's many ways of looking at it. Essentially, I think the relationship between teacher and pupil has to be of a certain quality. The meeting of teacher and pupil, and that creates an arena of co-regulation where you and I work together.
Mm-hmm.
In this meeting, something starts to happen between two people.
Mm-hmm.
Can you achieve something of value on your own sitting cross-legged in the Himalayas? Maybe. In isolation. But do I think that the two-person game has more power and value? I do. I think most of our distress and our reactions are caused in two-person or social settings or interpersonal settings. And I believe that the resolution also comes in the form of interpersonal relations. The wound is the same place as the healing. I believe that very strongly. So I think the royal road for me is two nervous systems operating in a way that didn't operate historically.
Mm-hmm.
Two nervous systems working together.
Yeah.
Nervous systems cooperating in a way that offers the potential for healing rather than a re-traumatizing.
Right.
If you think
And
that
that,
most of our traumas are a result of two-person situations that didn't go well,
yeah.
then I feel that the opportunity of resolution and working through and healing has to be in a new relationship of meeting where something new happens and there's a reorganization of the nervous system.
Yeah.
A co-regulation that leads to a self-regulation of safety. And the safety for me is paramount. If you look at the work of Stephen Porges, without safety, you're not going to get very much of value happening. So if I blame and shame you, I don't believe we have the prerequisite of safety, without which I don't believe you can go through your own processing of your history.
I would agree completely, and that's why my practice of teaching has led me to giving people way more external supports, props, such as these ropes to hold them up and let them feel safe. And I found that that's been way more effective for people because they can sense a sort of security that a prop gives them, and then they can deepen their observation of what's going on, or just um, come off those buttons, as you're saying.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the power of you, and not just the ropes. That you're also creating a bubble of safety.
Yeah,
an embrace of safety with your being. You're actually saying to them non-verbally, "You're okay. I'm not here to shame and blame you, nor let you push and pull, nor ambition yourself into some perfection and diminish who you are, or tell yourself that you're wrong and bad, that you're not coming from that place." And when you just had that little softening of some of the external structure that you were holding for a little while, just a tiny amount, even that just softened something, and you came from a deeper place of self-acceptance rather than self-pushing. And I think that's a really powerful emanation. And I think that's perhaps the most profound part of your communication, even though you're going to be offering form and structure.
Right.
Form and the structure that you're offering in your wonderful yoga sessions is informed by the bathing of your openness, by your self-acceptance, by
Yeah.
your quality of being. And I think that's the essence of the communication that's really coming across much more.
I think so too, and that's comforting because the all the linguistic hoops that I find myself trying to jump through to organize people into some whatever, through some sequence of shapes and into certain specific shapes, it just feels like it's siphoning some of my siphoning some of that essential juice. Uh, or maybe I'm just becoming less interested in it over time. Like, just find myself saying things that I've said for 20 years, and in some instances, not even believing them all that much anymore. So it's this, I'm in this weird place of, I guess, teaching evolution and personal evolution, where there's the urge to cling to the past, um, balanced by an equal urge to go into this more unknown. But I will typically default to the thing that I've known and start reciting, really at this point, just old information that's just don't know that it's serving anyone. It feels like I'm giving just space fillers of words, and not in some ways trusting people that they not trusting people to have their own experience. Uh, and so it just doesn't feel so good. After the session we had a couple weeks ago, I'm like, oh, that's a reset I needed. It positively impacted not only my interactions with children, other people, my other lessons, on to the next day's lessons. And then at some point, it just kind of evaporated. I found myself going back into the default and then flailing and trying to say, how did I get that thing that we had? And so I understand now there is no hack to come back. But I guess I just wanted to process with you or verbalize it how the old way feels less and less helpful to people. I feel
Let's
like I'm
play
getting
with that. Let's play a little bit with that. And there isn't a hack back, but there are certain things you could say you would avoid. And through the avoidance of certain, maybe traditional ways of teaching, you're already going to be encouraging or inviting them to return to the zone. So you'll avoid words like right and wrong. You'll avoid asking them to try harder. You'll avoid them ambitioning for a certain form and the precision of that form as a be-all and end-all, but using the form to activate something internal, using the form as just the bones in which to cover with clothes. And so you have an attitude towards what you're doing. The form of yoga is going to be clothed or influenced by your being, and maybe having faith that that's going to be much more important than simply achieving form. And that's perhaps a growing faith that you'll have in your teaching.
Yeah.
As you become less and less obsessed or overly emphasizing structure and form, you'll find there's room for the other stuff. It's just there. You're demonstrating a certain structural precision, but there'll be the inner you that is manifesting something different than simply the external you that's shaping and forming and structuring.
Mm.
And I think that kindness towards yourself also comes through as in your communication. I mean, don't forget, there are many ways that you're communicating self. There's your voice. Can't hide from that. There's your facial gestures. Yeah, facial gestures of ease and or trying or irritation or depression or whatever, facial gestures. And there's also your movements. Movements, and whether your movements are manifesting this aspect of yourself or another. Are your movements efforting and trying to reach, and you can see it in the face, the gesture and the voice? Or all of these things will work together anyway. So you have voice, facial gesture, physical movements, and maybe even a fourth something about you that's emanating, that's somehow communicating. The people with you are picking up all of you, whether they know it or not. And I think that's the central communication of your teaching, more than thinking that you're just communicating form. Because I think if you communicate form with the way of being in the world that you are right now, they're getting much more than form. They're getting form and content together. I think you'll find that much more of a pleasurable way of teaching yoga. The form and the content. The form with acceptance.
More pleasurable way.
The form without trying and the form without ambition. The form with aliveness and without sleepiness. The form with availability and invitation, and not the form with shaming and blaming. And I think that just is something that will inform. The form will inform your work because of the essence of who you are.
Yeah.
That's the hack. That is the hack. The hack is that growing process of you communicating with all of you. And as a result of the work we're doing here, you navigate back to yourself. And I think as that becomes more of a priority than ambitioning form, you'll find the rest percolates. And I believe that is going to radically shift the way that you will teach. And I think it'll be more pleasurable and more satisfying.
And that's reassuring, because when it feels better for me, I know it actually is going better for everybody else, and vice versa. When I'm sensing that inner turmoil, I know that in some ways is infecting somebody else. So I feel a real grave responsibility to not hoist that on another.
Yeah, well, a word of caution: inner turmoil doesn't necessarily communicate.
Really?
Reacting to the turmoil probably would. So you can have a bad day when you're feeling upset about something. That won't necessarily communicate across the divine. If you're stifling it and trying to mask it and trying to come across as all happy jolly, that'll communicate. That's inauthentic.
Yeah.
But I don't think inner distress or inner sadness or inner joy or inner anything necessarily communicates. Inner trying communicates. Inner stifling communicates.
Yeah.
Inner trying hard to get an idea across communicates. But the fact that you can just be available to your what you call inner turmoil, things are moving you and you're open to experience both positive and negative, even though I don't even like the word negative. But whatever feelings you're going through, if you're available to them, sad, loss, hope, dreams, disappointments, wounds, being available to all of that, being available to all of that doesn't communicate. I think that's important. So I don't think you should be giving yourself a hard time for having experience, because that doesn't communicate in a negative way to anybody. Okay. And that's really important, because often we give ourselves a hard time for being human, and that's bonkers.
Yeah.
Minimizing isn't the human stuff, but the reaction that can be refined and can be minimized, the stifling and the reactivity and the pushing and the pulling, that can soften and melt, but it reveals a whole range of feelings that are still going to be available.
Yeah.
So really be okay with, not saying it's pleasant, be okay with whatever experiences you're feeling while you're working. That may be a portal to working authentically.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go. You don't have to be some sort of neutral, zened out monk to perform well as a teacher. Quite the
Yeah.
opposite.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think one thing you have told me before is just if you do a little less of such and such, it's such a kind way to say, just do a little less of that thing that you would do if you're trying to reach out, whatever.
Yes,
Grab.
so you can only do a little less when you recognize you've done a little more. So if I'm
Yeah.
reaching my arm out and I'm doing a little bit more, I back off a little bit. I don't have to reach more. I don't have to get to the end of a range. I back off a bit, and that is a bit kinder to me.
Right.
It's a recognition of my own ambition to get more, to reach, and
Right.
I back off a little bit. And I tell myself, Anthony, you don't need to ambition to the edge of the range. And that little bit less is, again, a way of being a bit kinder to myself. And that's part of the process.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's based on your growing awareness of when you do a little bit more.
yeah.
You're on your own, you haven't got anyone to say, hey, like I said to you then, do a little bit less and see where you go.
Mm-hmm.
Did a little bit less and you feel the softening.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is when your own awareness is your teacher, these things will happen without this encounter.
Right.
And then you find yourself navigating back home to a less trying you, to a more of an allowing you. And that's powerful stuff.
So if we're gonna bring it, the 4 quadrants model that you came up with, the
Yes.
more less tone, the whatever, engaging, relaxed, collapse, whatever. So if I recognize that my tendency is toward end gaining or toward overworking, and I try to set is the tone. No, not try to set. But just
If you register your end gaining,
yeah,
as in your whole body will tell you, you're like, oh goodness, I'm pulling my head back and straining with my face, trying to achieve something. I'm trying to hit a good shot in tennis. And by definition, you'll register it very quickly and you'll regulate back again. There's nothing you have to do. It's not like,
right.
oh, when I find myself end gaining, what do I have to do? No, you will find yourself in all of these patterns of end gaining and mind wandering and concentrations and collapses. You'll find yourself in all of them. And your
Right.
ability to navigate back home is simply going to grow. It's not like you need to have a hack or an answer. So what do I do when I end game or ambition myself? You'll register your ambitioning and you're already back home when you've registered it anyway. That's part of your evolution. So even then, when you say, what's the missing link? I notice I'm doing all of these patterns of reaction. There's no doing. There's nothing to do. It's already done.
Mm-hmm.
And you're already back home. You're already back home. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to correct. The correction is auto-correction. It's auto-generated and it's self-regulated.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm trying to help you off the button of what do I do when?
Yes.
Or what's the answer if? Because I don't
Yes.
have any. Maybe the ability to not even ask the question, because the question will have within it its own answer. You don't need anything at all because you're on the path. You're regulating back home. And you don't need to fly up into the brain and start questioning, now what do I do? And now what do I do? You can notice that happening, the why. And back to sitting. Back to sitting. Back to nothing. Back to no answer. Back to nothing to do. And I think that's the best hack. There is nothing. There is no hack. There's nothing to do, and there's no answer. and the rest reveals itself over time for all of us. Things evolve, and the way back home becomes stronger. The path becomes more worn, and new pathways are created in the brain, and self-regulation deepens. And that's all you need to know.